Everything we do, we have written procedures for, which is not here. This is called a TO. It's a table of organization. What it has is materials, equipment, and then your assembly. Okay? There's difference for this thing. So to do a hatch dam, and that's what we're going to do first, is the damming up above. And damming is, we're adding, if you look at this hatch detail, we're looking at this way, okay? This is your existing ceiling, okay, right here. This is your trim that you can see around the hatch, right? This is the existing, usually drywall or a piece of plywood that's in there. We push that up to crawl up in here, right? There's only a little bit of insulation typically in the buildings when we get there, or we vac it out. So we're going to add more, right? This is the additional insulation, the new insulation. It's going to be higher. So we need to add a damming around there, right? A box, so that the insulation doesn't fall through the hatch. The next time the cable guy or the television guy gets up there to access anything in the attic, all that insulation doesn't fall down on his head, right? So to do that, we need to put a piece of plywood up here. It's called OSB, oriented strand board, chipboard, all glued together. It's more stable than plywood, that's why we use it. And then we use a 2x2 as a nailer. So we fasten it from here to here with a nail, right? And so we have our nailer and we have our dam material, okay? This is heavy, and all this up here, this is the 2-inch pink foam that you use for a substrate when you're the bottom, when you cut that last piece of OSB. If we insulate all this to what we call an R49, we put a really thick blanket here, and we just have one piece of plywood there. What we've done is we've kept all the heat inside the unit. All the heat's down here inside the building. Now we made the attic colder, and we want it colder. We want the soffit vents to come up, keep that roof sheeting cold, and go up the roof vents. But now if we just have one piece of plywood here on the hatch, that's ice cold. The warm, moist air from the hallway or inside the unit, it's going to touch that. It's going to be a condensing surface. So it'll be like an iced teacup out in summer. The moisture in the air will hit that, create moisture, beads of water, right? And what happens is that sucks the moisture up in the drywall or the plywood, mold, mildew, icicles, it rains, things like that. And it can be significant. Like it can literally just feel like it's raining. It's so humid in those hallways. So we have to insulate the hatch lid at the same level or equal to the rest of the ceiling, so it's not a large difference in temperature. Okay, you just laminated these. So on one side we have this drawing. One side we have this drawing. On the other side, this is called a section view. I cut this, and I'm looking down through the guts of it, right? I cut my arm, I'm looking into my bone. It's called a section view. This is an isometric view, a 3D model of the exact same thing. Does that make sense? And so these are the bottom chords of the trusses we walk on. This is the little header board. This is our nailer. This is our hatch dam. And these are little 2x2 nailers, okay? So just kind of look at that. It's kind of goofy sometimes when you look at 3D and you kind of can't see it. Then this is a list of all the materials we need and equipment, okay? The biggest thing is you have to have pencils. You have to have a sharpener. You have to have a measuring tool. You don't measure it right, mark it right, cut it right, it's not going to be right. Whenever we're doing this, it's everything we have is a two-person job, right? One person does each task, okay? We always work in teams. One person has one task. I don't need Oscar to help me hold a board. I don't need Oscar to help me cut a board. I can do my own things, and I need to set it up there, but we work as a team to accomplish the goal, right? So with that said, we already have a hole inside of our building, right? This is the attic hatch, scuttle hole they call it sometimes, attic access. The hatch we access the attic with, it's there. So we already know. So what needs to happen, the very first thing, is we need to measure this hole. And if you don't understand terminology, ask me. The boards we walk on in the attic are called chords. The bottom chords of the trusses is what we walk on. The top chord is what the roof sits on. Top chord, bottom chord. All that stuff in between, the W's and the V's, that's webbing, okay? So bottom chord, top chord, webbing, okay? So using the correct terms helps everybody be on the same page. These are called headers. Typically, sometimes these aren't even nailed in. So never put your ladder against a header, always the bottom chord. So like here. Just to be more comfortable, I went like this, right? Doesn't work that way. Any weight on these sometimes falls through. We never step on these headers. They could be just a 7-penny nail, which means it's only in that wood half-inch. You'll fall through and break that whole drywall out, get hurt, everything else. So what we need to do is measure this hole, okay? It doesn't matter if there's webbing on top of these cords or it's clear like this. There's no webbing here, right? So it's going to be pretty easy. Sometimes there's webbing here and we'll have to do some modifications. We'll learn it this way and then we'll add the modifications for webbing. But regardless, this is all the same process. You have to measure your opening, So this is 25 inches. Okay? This is 22 and a half. Most of our framing is either going to be 16 inches on center or 24 inches on center. And the reason that is, all of our plywood comes 4 foot. So if you divide 48 inches, 4 foot, by 3 you get 16, divided by 4 you get a foot increments. So the edge of that plywood, just like this drywall, is always on a stud. It's never going to end here. So your bottom cords are always going to be 24 inches on center. So that means, for 1.5 inches, it's always going to be 22 and a half. Is it always? No. These buildings move, they shake. We want ours to be perfect, and so you got to measure it. So the most critical measurement is this, the 24 and a half, okay? It could be at a square, like I measured that, the long side and the short side, essentially. I could have measured these other two. You never need to, because what we're going to build is square. So you always put your long side on first. Do you know what I mean by long side? So if you see here, it's 25 inches this way, and usually they're like 30, 33. We just made it 25 here for demonstration. And it's always 22 and a half, almost always. It could be 22 and 3/4, 23, depending on how things stretch, okay? And so what I want to do here, see how this is green, this is green, this is green? That's factory edges. You all cut this edge, right? So my next ones may not be all green because it'll be the middle of sheets. But I always want to measure off a factory edge if I can. So because if this is wonky, it's going to be wonky. So try to find your straightest edge. It's usually going to be this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark opposite because that's the saw you have. It's a left blade versus a right blade. So that was 25 inches, right? I'm not going to make it 25 inches. I could leave this whole length because I want, look at your picture, your 3D.
Yeah, overhangs.
See how it overhangs? Mm-hmm. The more it overhangs, the better because you need that nailer. Do we really need it to be that long? Probably not, okay? So what I'm going to do is it's 25. I'm probably going to add 6 inches. Okay, so I'm just going to go, 25 inches, add 6 inches. So that's 31, okay? I'm already here. I already know what I'm going to mark. So what am I going to mark? Yep, 25 plus 6, right? So 31. And a lot of times in construction, don't be a math wizard. Mark 25, then come back, mark 5 more, okay? So essentially what we need to do is make sure we mark. So you can use this, or we can use this. We'll do one each way, okay? So this is our mark, right? I'm going to cut it here. I'm going to mark both sides, okay? And I'm going to do both. Anything you are going to do the same thing on, you really need to try to bulk your stuff. No sense marking, cutting, setting saw down, marking, cutting, setting your saw down, okay? So you see what I just did? I put one on each side of the cut. Well, what's going to happen when I cut down it? It's going to go teepee, right? Right in the center. So you need at least 2 on your keep side, and then this side I don't care if it falls. If I want it to fall, I want it to fall up instead of in because I don't want to pinch my blade, okay? So keeping it close, stability, all of that. We have a cut table specifically for this, that little MFT table back there, similar to this one. All right, eyeballs. Everybody have safety glasses? All right, so I set the blade 1.5 inches. I made a mark on here. This blade, from this edge to this side of the blade is 1 3/4 inches, okay? And so that's gonna come important when I put this clamp on in a minute. Cutting a line takes practice, okay? Going fast isn't gonna help. Having a sharp blade helps. This blade needs to be changed for sure. The less teeth per inch on a blade, the faster it cuts. Everybody wants to get this nice, big, expensive blade, 60, 120 teeth per blade. You get a 10-tooth blade, it looks crazy. It'll cut this thing. You can't even push it fast enough, just like you're doing the festival today. That's a 60-tooth blade. That's really fine cutting. Yeah. If you had 4 teeth on that big blade, you could have ran and cut it because it's removing more material with less. The gullets in between are deeper, so you remove less pull. Using a bigger shovel. Anyway, it takes practice, okay? Let the saw do the work. What I always do is go up. I'm cutting a line. I come up, and then I come down. I can't aim down that big long road just perfect, like this. I can't aim like this perfect, but I can get that very, very tip of that perfect, and then I can just follow it, and then I'm just right on there. Kind of like a curve. I go around a curve, and then I straighten out. So that's how I look at it, okay? I like to half the line. See that? I'm 1 inch into it, but I'm not even through the 1/2 inch yet, okay? So it's like 2 to 1. And then I come down, I'm straight. All I gotta do is push straight, and I'm done. My toes are pointing straight, my thumbs are straight. I can't be unstraight. And then let it stop, take it off, okay? This is my scrap. I need to throw this in the scrap immediately. So this is my scrap pile. That's my scrap pile. I don't try to touch it twice. It's nice when your nail or your offsets are a little shorter, but that's fine. All right. So we have these two, and I'm going to set these aside just for a minute because again, I want to batch stuff up. So what was my other dimension? 22.5. So again, 22.5, right? This one has to be perfect because if you look at your sheet, I'm building a box. So I have two long sides overhanging my opening, and then I have two short sides. If I cut this crooked, probably isn't going to matter. These have to be perfect because that's what's going to make it square, and it's going to be really important when we put the foam board in it. So we have to put that big plug, that extra insulation on top. If we make it like this, we'll never be able to get it in or out. It'll be too small. If we make it like this, there's too much of a gap. So just make it nice and square, okay? So here, I'm going to make a mark. Put these in here real quick. And you also got to think about your conditions you're working in. It's freezing cold out, right? Like, what's the temperature outside right now?
2 degrees.
Okay. What was it 3 months ago, Oscar? 100 degrees, right? Like, it doesn't really matter, right? Every time it's hot, it's cold. There's very few months in the year that it's actually nice out. So you need to set yourself up for consistency. Anybody can cut a straight line all the time when it's perfect, but when your conditions aren't perfect, it'll never work out, okay? So again, it never really hurts. You know, describe your line all the way across, make sure you're square. Measure twice, cut once. This little gadget here, oh, I didn't do something right. You remember how I measured that tool? Another way to do it is like this. Let me just go. If you don't want to measure and you don't understand what's different saws, what I'm doing here is I cut my line where I want it. I'm going to reference this guard, okay? And so what that happens is, I mean, it's going to be 1.5 inches. I'm burning inch and a half to the outside. So I'm burning that, right? That's what it's called when you do that. So when I put this on here, I'm going to push this all the way up. I don't know what that is, I guess. I'm going to have to measure over here. So I could go like this and add 1.5 inches to that. I never would. I'd come here. It's 2 foot exactly. Okay. It shouldn't be 2 foot. It should be 2 foot. Okay. 22.5. Oh, yeah. Right there. Perfect. Yep. 1.5 inches. Okay. Because the margin of error is a lot less if I do this versus if I try to measure from here, detail to detail. So I always want a solid reference point. Simple, okay. Put this on my reference point. So what I was saying a minute ago about being hot and cold and all that jazz, the conditions aren't always ideal. So how do I make it so I can always be consistent in my markings, okay? And so if I always use a table saw, a fence, a stop, something like that, I'm always going to be consistent, right? I don't have to try, I don't bump, I'm cold, my fingers don't work, and it's safer. So again, these are my scrap. These are my scrap, and these are my keepers, right? So what else is the next step, you think? Yep, throwing these on, right? And so you can do this a lot of different ways. That's all pretty cracked up. I'm probably not going to use that one. Some of these 2x2s you get, they're going to be building the boat. They're going to be crazy. These are nailers, furling strips. They're junk wood because you use them for just scabs. And so just make sure you have good stuff. Don't be afraid to throw wood away. This nailer should not be the same length as the board. I mean, it should be real close, or it shouldn't be any longer. Let's say that, okay? Yeah. So we need 2 of those. Once you do a few of these, you don't need to scribe a mark across there. You'll figure it out. Like, if you can't cut a straight line 1 inch, you probably just need a little more practice. Okay. All right, so now we have these, okay? And the best way to nail these on, and it seems like it's taking a little bit of time, and I'm going to talk to this, but I'm telling you what, if you do it the exact same way each time, you will never have a problem, okay? So this is something important. When we put this in our hatch, right, we have a board. Let's go over here for the camera. We have a board here, and then we have a nailer, right, on the bottom. That nailer is going to go into the bottom cord of the existing. I want my smooth side to be on the inside of my hatch. So whenever my plug is in there, I mean, just feel that's a little rough. My clothing, anything, I don't want it to get caught, splintered, or catch that lid that goes down. I want it nice and smooth. So then what side does this go on? Your nailer goes on your rough side, okay? Because the nailer's on the back side. We always want the smooth side, okay? Like that. We have some nailers here. Just make sure you have nails that aren't going to go through everything. Because you don't want to come through. Make sure your light's on. So this one. Okay. And we're set. All right, so now I have this on here, okay? One nail shot out there. Never have your fingers close to this. And so I don't think I have a pair of pliers. That probably worked. So you need a few tools to make this happen. Ideally you wouldn't want to bend one over, but as long as you can't get hurt. And then if you look, I didn't make this perfectly flush with this. See that? There's no reason to do that because up there in that world, it's not going to be right. It's not going to be flush. I want this edge right here to sit on my bottom cord perfectly. I don't want that 2x2 to accidentally make a V or make a cushion, right? I want that reference edge to be on that reference edge. So now this is done, okay? I'm going to use this as my block for here because I don't want this to be like this at an angle when I'm trying to nail it, right? So again, I put them in there. It works out. I want my green side. Again, use the straightest sides possible, okay? So just a little bit on each side. This gun, you push down, pull the trigger. Push down, pull the trigger. There is a setting, and it's on, where I can hold the trigger and go, oh, I guess it's not. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, it must not be working. Where you can just smack, smack, smack. Don't do that. You'll break something. It's just not made for that. So push the safety down. See the little plunger? Push the safety down, pull the trigger. Keep your hands away because they will split out, okay? So we're good. We have both those. Now what do I need to do with these two long ones? Same thing, right? So what measurements did I take? Like how much interaction have I had with this so far to cut all these? 2 measurements, right? So how could you work in a team so that this could be centrally located, in a tent, we have pop-up tents, or in the building, or in a box truck. Somebody could go take measurements, right? And so a lot of times when we have the site plan and the map, just right on here, H1, H2, right? Or east, west, south, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So then when you're the cut person down on the ground, you'll probably be cutting all day. And the other person go, take all the measurements, then they can be the installer and install everything. There's no reason we shouldn't have all these measurements marked like that. I pop the lid up, worst case scenario, I just look at my measurements, right? Then that helps also because you might have hatches that are 22, 22 and a quarter, 22 and 3/8. And so when you bring your material up, you don't put it by the wrong hatch, get up there and be like, oh, it almost fits, right? So anyway, so when I do this, I mark the top, but I'm rolling it to me because I want to see my line when I cut it, right? Because if I go like this, I'm still guessing 1.5 inches. Yeah. And so it makes it easier when I go here. And I'm really going to encourage you not to go as quickly as I am, okay? Having your scrap bin, all of that, just make an effort to not go as quickly as I am. It's always quality, then precision, okay? We used to put all these 2x2s together, like in here, and screw them together and take them to the property and cut them all at once. But it just creates a lot of scrap when we do that. And so we stopped doing it. But that's something a lot of people ask. Again, my green factory reference. Make sure I'm not overhanging any direction. Fingers are out of the way. If this gun stops firing for any reason, take the battery out. It could be jammed, but typically you're out of nails when it happens. So the other green ones, they will continue to fire empty, okay? So anyway, so I have these, right? So these are my long sides, right? They're longer than the 25 and whatever. These are my short sides. When I did this, I should have used my scrap. And I need to put nailers on here, because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to nail those on, okay? So there's a couple ways you can do nailers. You can put them on that side, you can put them on this side. I prefer to put them on my short sides, because again, I have two long sides. My short side is going to flip up in between it, then I can nail it in. When you do that, I'll show you, you have to have a square or it won't work, okay? And so somebody might say, well, you have these long sides, you're going to put them in. Can you hold that for me? Right, we have this, right? I know it's 25 and a half. Why don't I put one here? And I measure over 25 and a half and I put one in there, right? So then when I put this up in the attic, it's just perfect, right? It doesn't work that way. You got to slide this in. You got to make sure this is exactly perfect. It's exactly square. What we're doing is we're taking pieces and making a square box. If it was as simple as pre-assembling in this and just putting it on and it worked, that'd be great. Never, ever has worked that way because we're in old buildings. They've settled. They've done all kinds of stuff, okay? So to do this, you need a couple pieces, probably 6 inches. Doesn't really matter. But we need them on the same side as our scrap today, okay? So right there and right there. So you see your pictures? Okay. I like to put them at the top, so I can actually see what I'm doing when I'm up in the attic. That'll make sense in a minute. So your cut person, don't worry about lining this whole thing up. See how that's in? Come over here and look at that quick. See how that's way far in? And I could spend a very long time getting this just perfect, all the way like this, right? Perfect, perfect, and slip. Again, you got gloves on, you got glasses on, it's cold, it's windy, it's raining. I'm gonna put one nail there. I only care about this. Okay? Make sure it's not overhanging and it's not too tall. It's the only thing you gotta worry about. So aim small, miss small, right? Don't worry about the whole thing. I'll put one nail in. One nail. Now I can control this. I have a control point. I have a reference. All I gotta do is push that in, pull it out, put another nail. It won't move, okay? Again, same thing here. Don't worry about getting it all perfect. Get it started, okay? That one just happened to work out just fine. Again here. Earlier you saw me hold that board up like that and cut it. Never do that, okay? Always just try to, the knots will always give you, knots are super hard. That's where the tree, branch goes outside the tree. Cut them off, don't use them. Whatever you do, just don't nail through them. Okay? All right. This I'm not too critical about having exactly right as far as like this here, because it's 1.5 inches off. These are just little nailers. Doesn't really matter if I wanted to. Just do it independently. All right, so we're approaching the end. So this is what you need to build a hatch. That's what it should look like to build a hatch, okay? When you give it to somebody up there. These are two different guns, okay? So this is a brad nailer. Inherently, brads are always straight. It's a piece of wire. That's all it is, a hardened piece of wire. That's why they split out so easily. It's made to hold small materials together. They're not strength, they're tacks, okay? This is a nail. It's actually a hardened nail, and that color on the outside is glue. So when the friction it goes into a piece of wood, that glue heats up and it seats that nail in. That's why we can get away with smaller diameter nails these days instead of big framing nails, because they just don't put a hole and it's all loose. It actually glues mechanically in there. Anyway, all nails are angled. Doesn't matter what size, what shape, what brand, they're all angled. It could be 34, it could be 32. They're all angled, okay? So brads are straight. Nails are angled. Okay, it says angled right on it. 34 degrees. This won't fit in there. this will fit here. This will fit in here. You can slide this in and ruin this. Okay, we've done it lots. So make sure you have the right thing. That's why on here, they're all engraved. You'll never see a nail gun that has a sticker or paint. It's always engraved, so it'll always be there because it's such a big issue. A couple things is these are 15 gauge. That's the diameter wire. Wire nails, the smaller the number, the larger. Just the way it works. And the angle is 34. Typically, you buy the same brand as you do nails. You probably won't have to worry about that because we'll always have the proper materials. These are the same thing, same gauge. They're just straight, okay? That's kind of junk anyway. So anyway.
That's a 15 gauge as well?
This?
Yeah.
Yes. No. This is a 16 gauge, I'm sorry. So Brad nailers, the ones we have are 16 gauge, 15 gauge, and we have a smaller one. Oh, a 16 gauge.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think the Milwaukees are 16 gauge. Because these just are a little heavier duty, they hold a little more. The issue is these are 2.5-inch nails. So you hold 2 pieces of wood and nail it, you're gonna shoot yourself, okay? The reason I like these, they have a great big clip. That won't fall off, where this one just has a little tiny clip and it will fall off. You need to be very comfortable working, okay? This clip is exactly 2 inches, and the reason it is because you use it for framing, right? So what are 2x4s? 1.5 inch, right? So you have a little bit to hang on. You are not gonna be able to do this from down below, but you can easily do this. And just hold it there, okay? I have a magnet on my tape measure, so when I quick access it, I just rip it off. But when you're working, it doesn't really help. Okay. So a few things you need up in the attic, and you need a hatch bag like this, okay? And so what that'll afford you to do is have some tools up there. You have to build this from up in the attic. You could probably do it from here and reach over. But what happens is you're going to be on this ladder, you're going to reach over, and you have this 14-inch piece or whatever it is, and you're going to shoot yourself in the belly. Just, it will happen. So long pieces first, okay? And so this is where it helps to have a friend. They kind of help you put stuff up here. One person gets up, helps the other person load it up, okay? So I'll take these up. And that's why having a big pouch isn't conducive to attic work, because it's really cumbersome. That's why we use a lot of the hatch bags, okay? All right. So when you're up here, most times you're always gonna have webbing, something to hold to. You're not just balancing. So I have 2 long sides, 2 short sides, right? When you have that webbing, you usually wanna put this up here. You don't wanna put anything on the drywall because it falls through. So I'll put this up here, but there's always V's like this. You want to put stuff on top of these V's that aren't on light fixtures, that aren't on wires, that never are on the drywall. You never know how weak it is. So how many inches do I have to be past this either way? Well, at least 1.5 inches, right? Because I have an 1.5 inch nailer. I made it a little bigger, right? But that's all it has to be, okay? So don't get too fretted over this. If it helps in the beginning to mark back, 2 inches, 3 inches, you can do that, but don't get too crazy about it. What I say earlier, I could be up here a long time. Is this flush? Is this not flush? Anyway, this plywood has to be flush with this bottom cord. And I could be up here, oh, is that flush on that side? Is that side? What side do I care about? Yeah, but what end do I care about? The whole thing?
Just that one end to have you direction.
Yeah, I only care about where I'm putting a nail, because I still have the opportunity to move all this, right? Unless something's really crooked, I'm not gonna worry about the center. Put it in, tap it in, make sure it looks good. Then I'm gonna nail it. We might even put a few screws in it just to secure it, but we'll see how it turns out. Especially if there's not webbing holding it, we probably would put screws in it. Because someone's always gonna grab it. So anyway, I put this one up. It's flush with the inside. It's overhanging my opening a few inches. And then this ladder here needs to be moved. That's why this task can't be with anybody else, like working in the attic, because they're gonna try to climb up the ladder and they're gonna break that, right? It's just, they're just for balance right now. So these hatches need to really be built before we do any attic work, okay? So again, I've got my other long side. And so how I reference this is long side, short side. And you see how I'm just balanced against this frame? It's just so much more comfortable than trying to balance out there in the middle of the world. And so it's always nice to have a little bit extra. Okay? And again, I'm trying to put my nails straight up and down. That's why I have this. I'm gonna point this at you. I can be just like that. I can go right next to my wood, and I can go straight down, and I don't have to angle it like this and go shoot my nails out. If I do, not a big deal. Beat it in. Make sure you can rub your hand over it vigorously, and no one's gonna get hurt. Okay. Again, make sure this is nice and flush all the way around. Get my leg in here, and see how I'm kind of struggling just getting this in here. That's how it is in the attic. Like, there's just stuff. So don't see how I'm just comfortable? I'm not leaning over here nailing this. You can't struggle. Reduce the struggle in everything you do, okay? Because there's always gonna be obstacles. And if you just get up there and you're sweating and it's hot and you get frustrated, you're gonna get hurt, okay? Okay. Again, use your attic bag, hang your stuff. Don't put so much on you because you're always gonna bend over and it's always gonna fall, okay? Katie came in my shorts. And really, we probably should clean up the ladder, but it's nice to have all this stuff up here before you start.
Okay.
Then you throw them in your cracks. Actually, I'm gonna give this to you to sit there. So which side do I put in? Smooth side, right?
Inside.
So essentially, it goes like this, right? Hold this here. It goes like this, and I tilt it right up. Perfect, right? And that's gonna make sure these are square, because I cut this square. I don't need that yet, because what am I referencing? The bottom? I'm making my bottom flush. I can only control one nail at a time, so I can only flush up one thing at a time, okay? I'm using my gun to kind of help. Put one nail. Flush it up. One nail. Oh. And I never want my hand on the inside when I actually nail, because the first time you do, it's the first time you're gonna get hurt. And that's the way it works. Okay? So now, hand me that square. Okay, this square is gonna go here, and I gotta make sure that crack is perfect, okay? I can't have a big crack like that. But I need to do it on this side, right? So I gotta make sure this is square. Because I already know this is gonna be square when it's tight, because I made this square, right? I made this square. I cut this right. So when I push this flush, it's always gonna be square. Now I gotta worry about where in the world does this thing go, right? So I put this here. I'm gonna encourage you to do this for your first couple hundred. Use a pencil, marker, put this in. So this crack right here can't be big, can't be here and here. It has to be flush against this. And I just keep moving this in until I get it, okay? Push this back, make my line up. So now I have a reference line. I don't have to balance this and nail, okay? We'll put clamps right here, okay? And then you clamp it, then nail it. Just be really safe, okay? Okay. Okay, so you got your square here, flush this up, make sure it's nice and square. Make your mark on top. Do the same thing over here, make sure it's nice and square. Put your mark on top, make a V, so you know where your line's at. Put that back in your hatch bag so you don't drop it for the third time. Put your short, line up your mark. Ooh. Mark's pretty close. Okay, so now we're done. Okay, that's your hatch. See, it's pretty secure. Now we'll go to the next step. Come on down. Come down ladders. I just did the wrong thing. You always face the ladder, because if you fall, you can grab the ladder. If you're going the other way and you fall, you go straight forward. And if it's a situation like this, it's like you saw Bill do. It kind of goes like this. Just hold the ladder. You're not going to fall.
Right.
It's not going to go anywhere. You might get a little startled, but don't let go of the ladder. Okay, no matter what. Now what we need to do is prep it to put an actual attic hatch on, the actual lid of the attic hatch. So we're going to nail 1x2s. So lumber is not dimensional. We call this a 1x2. It's 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches. Okay, so just know that. See that nail? My nail goes all the way through there, right? Yeah. That seems like way killer, right? But it's going to hold a piece of drywall, a piece of plywood, and 2 to 4 pieces of foam. It's going to be heavy. I mean, it'll weigh 20 pounds, right? I mean, they get heavy after you get them on there. that little piece of trim that's existing on there, because there's already trim on there, hold it, right? Usually it's barely on there, it's broken off. We need something that can really hold it. So we're gonna put this support on. Look at your pictures. Let's see one of your drawings there. So you see this right here? This existing trim is on there. It's just regular door casing, okay? And so we're gonna put this 1x2 here, so all this weight is now mechanically fastened, and we're gonna really secure this. It won't come down. You can do a pull-up on it. I mean, that's my thing. Everything we install, you can do a pull-up on, okay? Seriously. If it won't hold 200 pounds, it's not good enough. Because somebody's life your ladder might fall, somebody's gonna slip, they need to hold it, okay?
So you're putting that over top of the existing trim? You're not removing that trim?
We're not removing the trim unless we absolutely have to. And the only reason we'd have to if it was damaged or we damaged it, okay? So again, we already have our measurements, right? What were they, 25 and 22 and a half? Okay, so now that I have my 1x trim, the cuts a little bit ago really didn't matter, okay? They could have been a little off. I actually didn't think my shorts, I had a little, like a pencil line off, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? 2 or 4 of these cuts, 2 of these boards have to be perfect, because if you cut them and you look on the inside, it can't look like this or like this to have a gap, right? We don't want to have to caulk it, because then if we caulk it, then we have to paint it. We don't want to get there. So we have a little saw. It's a little shark tooth saw. This is a serrated saw. They're straight blades. Doesn't really matter. Japanese are this way, American are this way. Imperial. This is shark tooth. They're straight down, and the teeth are actually tapered. So they're tapered like this, and they're tapered like this, like a knife, like a point of a knife. What means it's super sharp. What it also means is the dull is easy if you drop it. Okay? So what are my measurements? 25, right? Okay. Okay. Typically, you want a smaller square to do this kind of stuff, just so it's nice and straight. Don't put your square on your line unless you have a really sharp pencil. Make sure you're on your V when you go. So like, come look at that. See how there's a little gap between there and there? I want my line to be straight and on my mark. I don't care if it's all up against my square. So essentially, if I was really good, I could probably go like this and make it work, see? It's all parallel. That one I didn't. But just make sure your line is actually where you want to cut. So again, measure twice, cut once, 25, 25, okay? This again is a skill. My keep piece, I want to keep. I don't want to drop on the floor and get dinged up. I want to put my thumb on the line. I don't want to cut myself, so I want to go a little bit out. Think about when you're chopping up carrots or something. You don't want the blade to go into your skin. You want your knuckle to rest on the blade, okay? So put your thumb, nice positive contact. I'm cutting on my waist side of my line, which is here because I flipped over. I'm barely getting my mark. Then I'm going to reposition. I'm going to push most of my pressure down. So push my pressure this way, what's going to happen? It's in a seesaw. I don't want a seesaw. I want to go down. Cutting on my downstroke. Okay? I'm barely even holding the saw. I'm not cranking it. If I push really hard, I won't be able to get it because there's too much. They're too big of teeth. Super light. Think about sanding. Okay? Again, just like I did with my big saw. Am I through the edge of it? Nope. I'm trying to get my line straight. Then I'll straighten it up, just like my circular saw. Okay? See how I was doing small strokes and at the end full strokes? Longer the strokes, the quicker you're gonna get material off. I think, I don't think that was my board. Yep, that's my board. And this is kind of all for nothing because you have a chop saw. We're gonna use that little chop saw. So you're gonna cut all this wood, even the big wood, you're gonna cut on the chop saw almost always. But I will say, it's nice to walk and then run, okay? Because you don't really appreciate those tools if you don't. And have you noticed every time I take my scrap and move it, the first time you trip and twist your ankle, you'll never leave scrap on the ground again. And it's all for a reason is my point. Anyway, brad nails. Brad nails are what? Straight, right? I'm reiterating this because this is a big issue, okay? See this? This is the back side. This is primed poplar. It's real wood. It's not MDF like this, cardboard. But there's a bad side and the finished side, okay? So which side do we want? Out. Yep. Bad side to bad side, right? Because if we do this and we don't have dirty hands, we don't ding it all up, we don't have to paint it, okay? It just works out great. So when I'm carrying this to the job site, which two sides I want to face each other so they don't get scratched up? Yep. And so if I'm doing a bunch of them, we have shrink wrap, we have tape, blue tape, not clear tape, blue tape them up, be done, right on the outside. This whole thing is to reduce the amount of back and forth. 25 inches, right? But what if it's in my truck like this? 25 inches, right? Then I know either side, I don't have to stack them a certain way. Reduce the struggle. Everything we do is reducing the struggle. It's not making it easier. It's not making it quicker by any means. It's reducing the struggle. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to remember. I don't write stuff down. Don't remember all the numbers. Write it down. And so we're going to say this is hatch 1, okay? H1, okay? So get your nomenclature, however you want to do, ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, don't really care. Doesn't matter, however you want to do it. All right. So someone had a question earlier about the existing trim, right? In the real world, there'll be drywall here, right? As far as what we're concerned, it doesn't matter. Say I have a piece of trim, and that piece of trim, it has drywall in between, okay? We did have some trim laying around here somewhere. Okay. So that trim is just barely, that's about typical, right? For the ones you guys have seen, 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch tops, maybe nothing over here. Pretend this is your trim, okay? So hand me one of mine, 25s, 25 H1s. Got it? And this is my long side, all right? These you can't really misplace because it's either gonna fit or it's gonna be too short. So over there it's too tight. Over here it fits just perfect. It's snug. I didn't have to use a hammer. I don't want to use a hammer. Okay? And so that one we'll have to cut. Could be a lot of things. This board, this header, is probably in like this a little bit. I probably measured the top, and so we need to be exact. This can have a little slop in it because, look over here. See this trim?
Yeah, it's kind of sticking out.
Can you see that there's a gap
No.
from here? You can't see there's a gap,
no.
but I can probably put 5 playing cards in between them.
Right.
So these don't have to be snug, but if you make them perfect, they'll be perfect. Nail gun me? That's a good point. When you hand somebody something, who's more comfortable right now? You or me? Yep. So hand me a tool that I can use, just like that, right? So a lot of times you go like this, so I can grab it and use it. If it's a dangerous tool, a lot of times take the battery out so it's off, so you're not handing somebody a weapon that's shooting at you. But just let them know it's off so they don't have frustration when they're doing it. But just be safe too, okay? But when you hand somebody a hammer or anything, just try to give it to them the way it goes. Okay. Okay. Thanks, sir. All right, let's trim that one up just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this in place. So I can go up here, I can go down here, put it here. I'm not going to go like this, but try to put it in as best you can. And you're going to mark this. And you're going to say, well, how can you do that? Your trim's on here. I can actually make this 1.5 inches longer and go above this trim right here. See? Stick it up in here so I can cut it twice. And the reason you would maybe want to do that is because you want it to be perfect. Okay? You don't want this to be a crappy situation, but I think we'll be fine here. So that's going to depend on your skills. If you can measure and you can mark and you can cut, try it. The whole goal is to get it right. Again, I want to be flush here, but my trim that's on here is going to dictate that. Okay? And I will say, if your trim's way off, we have to address it. Because if I'm not flush here on top, I don't want to be like that because I'm going to have a gap when I put my lid on. And so you want this to really be the clean line of what we're ending up with. So again, if you're what you're working with is out of square, out of whack, then we definitely have to just readjust. And a lot of times we do take this trim off and redo it all.
When you said you put it above, did you say the cut again, like so put it up there and then?
So what I've done So what I've done lots of times, I have trim here, right? Mm-hmm. I can't always measure from the bottom. Mm-hmm. And so what I would do is say, okay, my piece is going to be 21 inches, rough, right? Mm-hmm. So I can grab another piece of white 1x2. So I know that when I finish cut this, it's 21 inches. Mm-hmm. But I really have 1.5 inches because it's going to be inside of another piece of 3/4, 3/4. Mm-hmm. So I'll make it 1 inch longer. That'll give me some wiggle room. So then what I can do is put this up in here and it'll slide.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then I can just take my lead pencil, like which pencil would I use, right? My lead pencil?
Yeah.
Super thin. Mark it. Mark it. And so then those lines are perfect.
Okay.
Leave half of that pencil line on each, you're done. And when you have the miter box, it's so much easier. You don't have to cut it like that. So that's what I was saying.
Okay.
So these can be a little bit short.
Sure.
This can be a little long,
Sure.
because if this is that far off, it doesn't matter, because this is going to go into it, right? And so you'll cover it up.
Okay.
So don't force it like saying a hammer. Never. I don't have a hammer. Don't ever use a hammer. Pry bar for sure, because you're going to have to move nails, pull nails, and a nail set. So these didn't seat home. Look at how many marking tools I have. Talk about this for a second. So I have a lead pencil, real thin. I have a real thin long nose marker, okay? I have an adjustable carpenter's pencil, okay? And I have another lead pencil that's retractable, and it has a sharpener on it, okay? I can go here and have a sharpener. I will say this is well over $150 worth of stuff, okay? They're super expensive. This is nothing, right? It's $1. We have tons of pencils, we have tons of cheap pencils, we have a couple nicer pencils, we have a couple nicer one of these, 20 bucks or whatever. There's a different reason you'd use all of these. And if you paid attention, I've used them for different things. Marking the big wood, I used a marker, I use this, right? Because this is harder, it's a harder lead. And it's easier, and that's what it's for. It's for rough carpentry. This marker I would use for the wood, the 2x2s, because I want it to be nice and clean and sharp, and I don't care if there's marks on it. For trim, I would always use a pencil, okay? And so like here, I'm doing this, trying to scribe this really nice line, and knowing that I made my other cut off, I'm gonna use my real tiny pencil. So knowing what your tolerances are, that's all construction is in fine carpentry, is understanding your tolerances. How much can you get away with? If I'm framing a house, it's 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, because everything's gonna come after. Drywall, it's probably a 1/2 inch. I can be 1/2 inch off, we're gonna mud it all. Trim, probably a 32nd, right? Cabinetry is probably less than that. You gotta make sure that you have the tolerances in mind for whatever you're doing, right? Attic insulation, we're an inch here, it doesn't really matter, right? It can't be a foot. You know, air sealing, it has to be cover everything, right? You can't have two less, you know. And so understanding your allowable tolerances is a big deal. So this piece you're already gonna have typically, the attic hatch. A lot of times they're broken, a lot of times they're not, whatever. But if you notice, that attic hatch fit in this hole. We didn't make this hole smaller. A lot of folks that do this type of work, they'll take this damming and they'll run it all the way down to the trim. But now what just happened? They made their hole smaller by each direction, an inch, 1/2 inch on every side, and you just covered up all your reveal for your trim. So now you're gonna have to put more trim on, and your existing trim's way back here, so now you're gonna tear it off, put big wide trim on, just go flush. Sometimes it is a little bit of a pain when we have some webbing. You gotta cut a triangle, you gotta put a little backer on there, a little 2x4. But this is the part we don't wanna mess with. We don't wanna start getting into this paint, repainting. Now it's yellow, now it's super bright white. We paint the whole ceiling, now the walls look bad, gotta paint the whole wall. Like, seriously, it gets that bad. We wanna be as least invasive as possible. So if they have a hatch, we use their old hatch. So essentially their hatch is already cut to size. What would the size be? By, yeah. Because essentially that's what it is, right? And it is typically smaller. Because it does have to go up and down. All right, here's a little trick. I'm going to pencil lead. This is a straight edge, right? I leave it come off a little bit. It's not flat on there, so I can go squirrely. I leave it up, and then it's barely touched, but I keep my hand the same, and that's my line, right? So how far were we? 22.5? So I made my mark, and now I know my reference point. I wasn't out here trying to mark 22.5, and then I got to transfer it over. I knew exactly where to make that mark, right? So what's this mark over here? See, 22.5. And go past my world. Always scribble out your mistakes. Yep. Okay, who's got a blade on them? Yeah, that's fine. Again, you can use a straight edge, 2x4 or whatever, but you won't cut much. Start in the tip, bring it down. I am looking, not at my tip, I'm looking where I'm going to cut, not what I'm cutting. So think about hockey. I don't play hockey, never have, but don't think about where the puck, or soccer, don't think about where the ball was, where's it going, right? Where's your blade going, right? And just cut as fast as you are comfortable I'm just cutting paper. Okay? You start thinking about something else, you start talking to somebody, you will go off your mark. I have to go all the way to my end of my sheeting or it won't work, okay? This one I can go ahead and cut. Take my part, come down. Look at my finger, knuckle, wrist, elbow, all straight. Nothing else matters, but this has to be straight or I can't go like this. It will never work out consistently, okay? All right, now you cut drywall. You score this, maybe go from the top here, Dennis. So you score your paper, put your knee into it, cuts back. The more you bend it, the straighter it's gonna be. The reason I say that, if it's here and I score the back, I can be crooked, right? If it's a V, come right down here, Dennis. If it's a V, what's it gonna do to my knife? It's gonna trap my knife. I can only cut a straight line. I don't have to look, I don't have to do anything. There's nothing that can go wrong. Okay? I don't know which one was my mark. This one. So I scored that one too. So what am I going to do? Same thing, right? Keep the V. Don't put my hand next to the V. That one I'll get on the bottom, on the top. Don't go like this because you'll probably cut yourself. Cut all the way through helps. And so like that, I have a little bit. It didn't come off. Cut it off. Okay? I cut beyond my rip. Cut it off. It's nice and clean. Nothing's going to happen. Okay? So this is my hatch, right? Someday I'll get my own tools, I promise. So anyway, just like this. It's up, cut beyond my rip. Don't cut in the hollow. Then when I rip it, it comes off. And now it won't continue to peel. Okay? If I cut the hollow, it'll always be a bubble. So when you get bored, yeah, I'm going to go blade deep with this. Walk around the blade up. Tops. We cut these, and so they won't be jagged like this. But you're going to have a 2 foot by 4 foot piece. What did we say about the 2x2s and the plywood for the damage? Don't let them overhang. Okay? Like this is square. Put it on your table. Hit the drywall. Hit the plywood. Do not hit foam. You know what I mean by that? Can't be like that. See that? Right. The drywall has to touch. So make sure your drywall overhangs even a good 1/4 inch, okay? Because again, you see how difficult that was to put that in there?
Yeah.
If this is this thick, how difficult? It has to come down perfect, right? So make sure you got a good edge all the way around. Because this is pretty unforgiving. You have one chance to cut this straight, and you got to start over. You can't really adjust it, like keep trimming. It doesn't work. We could use a saw and cut this. These little beads are going to go everywhere. We do not want that. We have a magic little tool here. It's a death weapon. Look at that serrated blade. It's super thin and it's serrated. Okay? It's made for cutting this stuff. Yeah, this is exactly what it's made for. So watch this. I can cut. See that bouncing? Anytime it bounces, wood, foam, glass, it's bad. Push down on this. You want positive contact between your jigsaw, this is a jigsaw, and your substrate, and then your blade moves. Okay? Some blades cut up, some blades cut down. It just depends. But this is made for like shaping foam or all kinds of stuff. So see how that cuts with perfect factory? If I sawed that, it would be rough, like a coffee cup, right? That bead foam. And so you don't want that. But with that being said, this will bend, just like any blade. So the whole issue is cut slow, cut straight. The more you push on a blade, if I push and just let it cut, it's going to cut straight. If I push, the blade is going to deflect this way and this way. Whatever way has less tension. So if I'm pushing on a blade like this, it's going to cut that way. If I'm pushing on a blade like this, it's going to cut this way because it's less tension. I'm pushing hard over here, right? So it's very similar to a bandsaw. Everybody's like, oh, my bandsaw is not tuned up. No, you're pushing too hard and it's cutting opposite. So it's kind of like when you're in a car and you're in ice, you go opposite, right? So anyway, I'll go over here for Dennis. There is no jig that will help because if you put that brace on here, you're going to be pushing this way. What's your blade going to do? It's going to want to cut opposite way. Follow your line. Leave your line, cut on the inside of your line. Again, it's so small, right? Get over here. Again, this is kind of one shot, one kill. You don't have many chances. So on this, let's talk about this quick. I'm letting it cut. Once I get an inch into this, you're going to smell it. It's burning. It's not cutting. Because if it was cutting, we'd have scrap. We have no scrap. this blade on the friction is burning its way through. So you gotta let it burn. You go too fast, it's gonna cool off, it won't burn. You go too slow, it's gonna burn too much and it will smoke, right? See, look at this in here. See how it has a V? That, if you extend that down, that's your cut line. There's a light, there's your cut line, okay? So you don't necessarily have to look at your blade all the time, but it has a guide here and it has a guide here, okay? So you'll get used to it, but again, don't force it. See how I'm just a little bit on the inside of my line?
Yeah.
Maybe not even a pencil width, 1/16 of an inch? That's fine, okay? Don't go, it's better to be a little too small, not a lot, a little too small than way too big with anything. Yep. Look at that. I've cut a lot of those, but look, it's not 100% square, is it? I'm not leaving that.
Sorry.
See that? Look. Can you see that gap? Yep. And it probably has kind of talked a little bit, but it's a little wobbly, okay? So go slow, make it look good. And again, if it's a little less, it's not going to bother us. A little too much, it will bother us. Big time. Here's another thing you should know. Right here, and that could be a reason to do this. See this adjustment? This is a pretty nice jigsaw. These indicate how much give it has. So I don't know if you can see it from this way, Dennis. Go like this once. Look at that blade. Can you see it? Here, see that little circle?
Yeah.
Watch that circle and look how it oscillates. It goes in circles. See that?
Yeah.
Or see that guide bearing? See how it goes back and
yeah.
forth? It's like wheels on a train track, right? The wheels go in circles, but the brackets are moving in an elliptical pattern. The reason that is, when you have an aggressive blade, you want to cut, pull back, clean out the teeth. Cut, pull back, clean out the teeth. Because if your teeth are full of sawdust, you'll never cut. So in this application, we probably went on 0. Just go straight up and down, and you push through, and that'll probably give us a cleaner cut. So I didn't notice that. If you're cutting wood, plywood, with a different blade, of course, you want it as aggressive as possible, because you want to cut, clean, cut, clean, cut, clean. You don't want to just, and you'll never get a cut. Again, this, big deal. Don't put this down, don't bend it. A lot of times what I do is just do this. Oh, here's another issue. This is how you release it. This is big thing here. See what I did here? I didn't go like this and try to put my fingers, cut my fingers. Hand up here, go like this, because it doesn't matter. It'll fall out. It's not going to cut me. I don't care if I go like this. There's a lock you should use, but there's a lock on a safety bit. Keep your hands out of the way no matter what. Pretend it will happen.
Now you put it in too. You have to open that up.
Well, when you put it in, yep, when you put it in, the reason I do that is it's really hot. So when you put it in, take battery out. Okay? Just like any blade. See how this is bent? It's bent a little bit, you can't hardly tell. But it's bent. How you do this is turn it upside down. Turn it all the way open. See this little thing in here? It has to turn perfect, parallel with everything else. Perpendicular. And then you put it inside. This has a T-clip. There's different brands of these. This is the most common. And you put that T all the way in and throw it in. And see how it's nice and straight still? It's parallel with this. If it's not, it'll do this. Well, it pops out on its own. You'll get it halfway in and it'll turn sideways. You see that canter? See how that blade is not parallel with this surface?
Yeah.
It's not in. It's in, like it is. Well, battery. It's not going to fall out, but it's going to cut really crooked and it's going to damage everything. Your blade, your workpiece. So it has to be 100%. This has to be all the way open. Push this all the way in. And then it's nice and straight. Okay? And then that guide bearing has to be right inside that guide bearing. Magic fits. And that's probably, when you say Z, that's probably what you want. Just a little bit of wiggle. So all together, it's probably a good heavy 1/8, small 1/4 of an inch. Not tight. You get it up, you get it out. And so when you just have your lid, it has to be able to go all the way up. Okay?
You can't get stuck like up there.
So what does that test? If we build our box like this or like this, right? If it's like this, it's not going to work. We have to adjust our box. Can't cut this any smaller. So again, this is how you do it. You go one side up, put that corner up, and go on down.
So if they already have their own, this part, do you put this on top of it?
Usually, always, how I like to do it is you use whatever they have.
Right.
Whether it's the paint,
Right.
it's garbage, and replace it. We'll cut a piece of OSB now this size. Okay? We'll glue this, put the OSB on.
Right.
And the reason we do that is we need something to secure this to it.
Right.
Because this is old, junky, falling apart. We need that hard board, okay?
Okay.
And you can do that last. You don't have to. You can make this sandwich first. So you cut a bunch of these, sandwich them up. I don't think we have a good way of doing it. I know Zeke has a way. that he's done. I don't have a preference. I'll show you one chart real quick. You have a minimum of 2 of these, okay? Depending on the job and the installation or whatever, we can put a lot more. We're supposed to put R49, that's only R10 per inch, or R5 per inch, R10 for 2 inches. So we really should put a lot of these. It doesn't do much good after a certain level. It's just heavy, bulky, can't get it in, and it's a waste. So how I've done this in the past is 2 ways. Pretend this is plywood. Okay, forget this. This doesn't matter. I need to put this on top of it, okay? And I need to mechanically fasten it. I can't put it in and it all gets jammed in my hole, right? It doesn't block a foam. And it has to be fairly straight or it won't go up and down. I've done it several ways where I take this tape, I go here, I staple it. Obviously don't go through my plywood, not drywall, plywood. And then I put all my sandwich on. And I go all the way around them, sandwich them up, okay? And that's just a big thing. I mean, that's how the county does it, right? Big thing, like use half a roll of this. It works, it won't come apart. The method I prefer, just because I'm more comfortable and I know it'll never come off, is I use wire. So I've got this little belt on. Again, this is top, bottom, whatever. What I do, this is tie wire. So you use this primarily for like rebar, things like that. Tie rebar together. So what I would do, I wouldn't cut this, set it backwards. Same principle. I take this, I staple this down. Okay? So maybe I'll just fold it real quick just to make it applicable. And anytime you use this stuff, look what I just did. I pulled this, I crinkled this. With gloves, you'll spend 10 hours trying to figure it out. Then you always have something to rip. When you crinkle it, it's always there, you can crinkle again. It's just, you spend more time trying to figure out where the end's at than you ever do. But anyway, pretend, pretend this is stapled on, okay? Mechanically fastened. We used to use screws and eye bolts, little tiny eye bolts with screws. Put your wire on, go all the way around, thread it through, tie it up. Staple will just because typically once we leave this attic, no one will ever get it in again, except for the cable person and the TV person. But when they do, they're like a bull in a china cat. They'll kick and throw, and like they're not worried about our work, right? The reason I like the wire, if I have tape on here and I put tape, as hard as I push, that tape's just going to conform to that profile, right? Although if I have wire and foam, what do you think will happen? Cut through. It'll cut through. So I'm not making my block any wider by putting more 3 or 4 layers of tape. Sometimes you are that tight. So here I can go all around, and I would have had another piece of wire come up this direction. Let's do it real quick. So I have another piece of wire here to this side, or just one big long piece, and cut it. And then when I come up in the center, you bend 190, 190. Okay? See how that's hooked? Don't get in the situation where you just bend one and then you want to spin this around this, because what happens? Pulls right out, right? And it's like that with fishing string or anything. Make sure you're 90, okay? Because really that's all you have to do. It's never going to come apart. So once it's on there, you take your 2 tail ends, just like you would with rebar, and you tighten it. And what's happening? Look at the edge of the wire. See how it's going in? Because when I twist this, what happens is the total length of the wire shrinks, right? And then it shrinks. Top, we don't really care. Poke these down, push them in the foam, so no one gets poked, you're done. I put 2 this way, 2 that way, done. If for some reason they start delaminating or anything like that, throw a piece of silver tape on it from here to here, get it good. You don't have to get crazy with it. Some programs and residentials that do this, they do. Like, you have to use a whole roll of tape. Like, they make it. Like,
Yeah.
It's crazy.
In county, you have to do that metal tape around the.
Yeah, so you see no paint. It's just, maybe I'll get some pictures. It's all silver, the whole thing. It's crazy. But it's expensive.
Just
That
because
tape's
they
like
like it
$22.
like that?
What's that?
Just because they like it like that?
Just because they've had 30 years of people not doing it or doing it poorly, and then when the first time they go up, they can't ever get back down. Just think about it. If you have your plywood and your hatch in your hand, and you go down and it catches like it did with me 2 or 3 times, and now all that's up there like a deck of cards.
Right.
It's not insulating anything. Insulation has to be in contact with what's insulating. Okay? Think about a warm blanket. If you have an air shell around, it's not as warm. Put a warm blanket on you, it keeps your heat in. And so insulation needs to be in contact with the air barrier. We'll move that later. and so it has to be touching. There is special adhesives. We could put a couple pieces of adhesive on here, sandwich it on, and then there's special stuff for foam. You use liquid nail or something generic, it'll eat this because it's polyurethane based. This is petroleum based, it'll eat it, okay? And it'll burn. It couldn't cause a fire, never would, but it would be big black holes in here if you ever went back to look. And you'll see that on the old white beadboard stuff. I like mechanically fastened, not adhesive. Because what temperature is it outside? 5 degrees, right? Negative 10, whatever. How many times can I do this and it still work? Not very many. Glue's the same way. Super cold surfaces, it won't mechanically bond. I don't care how cold it is, that wire is not gonna break, right? So I like mechanically fastened. You never have to worry about it. Tapes and adhesive will fail at some point. They just have to. So that's why I like this. It just appears